Right, so here's something I haven't tried in quite a long time, probably 15 years, maybe more. Um, so I'm making up the clutch cable. I'm going to solder this nipple end on. I know Tim laughs every time I say the word nipple, but I'm going to say it again, nipple, nipple, nipple. So what I've done is I've made up the clutch cable. You can see it through here. Just stuck it through a hole in the workbench so I can get a grip on the cable just underneath where the fitting is, and then sort of splayed out the end of the cable with this little screwdriver to make, I guess, what's called a bird's nest. And then just with this little hammer and center punch, just stick that in there and then hammer it until it's kind of flat up against the end of the fitting. And then it's ready to be dipped in some flux and then soldered on. And here's the setup. I've got the end has been dipped in some flux. I've got a little metal paint tin lid with some low temperature solder in it, and I've got the blowtorch. So the theory is heat that up so it makes a little pool, dip this into it, the flux draws up the cable, and then that end is a permanent fixture of that cable. Well, it's not going to win any beauty contests, but here it is in the hole, and it is definitely a permanent fixture of the cable. So I will take that. Got the new head bearings in, done the one at the bottom first, so I could put the steerer tube on top of it, and then use the actual, well, the steerer tube guide on top of the bearing, and then use the steerer tube attached to the triple clamps in order to poke that up through here and line everything up whilst I then knock this home. I've got this great big socket which fits really neatly over the lip. I've tapped that so it's home. Weirdly, it doesn't look like it's all the way down, but like you can tell just by the way that the note changes when you're hitting it that that's definitely seated, and there's no gap. Maybe it's just not quite as precise as it could be. I'm also wearing gloves now because there's so much grease going on. I'm trying to get slightly less filthy. But now time to put the front of the bike back together. Right, that's the front back on for the most part. Turns nicely. Nothing is catching or stretching. Did have a little bit of a problem with down here. You've got the connections for the indicators that go out to the front. They're just little bullet connectors, and if they stretch, they just pop out. But you can see you turn it both ways. A little bit of movement, but it doesn't pull or stretch it. So once I got that cable tied away, that should be fine. The front brake caliper is back on. The bolts came out very nicely, having greased them last time, so wasn't fighting against that this time. So now to move on to the back brake. Right, well, amazingly, things are starting to go my way. It's been a bit of a productive day, all up really. Had a really good go at bleeding this combined braking system. Kind of figured out that, you know, you have to sort of start at the back and work your way forwards, and there's not actually a bleed mechanism on the little junction box thing for it, but I did manage to get it really well bled. So the front is now really good, and at the back we've got the new caliper on. Probably can't see it because it's a black caliper in a dark bit of the garage at night time, but it's much better. And if you look at the brake lever here, it's also got some really good feel to it, and it really holds the back wheel pretty well, so I'm quite confident on that. Pièce de résistance. We have a clutch lever. To be honest, it doesn't feel that bad. I know it's like one of these cheap AliExpress ones, but yeah, it feels pretty decent. And I think if you look down here, I know I said it earlier, but I've got it adjusted. I think it could go slightly slacker. There's thread up to about here, but it doesn't quite poke out the other end. So I'm going to stick a leather lock nut on that side just to secure it for, you know, trails and stuff like that. But I guess I could have made it maybe sort of 5 to 10 mil shorter, and it would have been better. But to be honest, I think it's gonna solve the problem. The bit that I soldered on seems to be holding quite nicely. You can see all works quite well. Does it through the full range of movement for that little lever. And I guess the good news is that when you pull it in, the back wheel spins, and when you let it out, when it's in gear, it doesn't spin, so that bodes well.